In January, I made a video titled, "What Happened to Every #1 Quarterback Recruit from 2000 all the way up into 2021. That video took a really long time to make, but here's the thing, you guys really enjoyed it. So a couple of months later, I figured, hey, why not? Let's do the same video, but on the running backs. You guys really enjoyed that video, and I saw a lot of comments of people saying they want to see the same video, but on the wide receivers. Don't get me wrong whatsoever, I enjoyed the quarterback and running back video, they were entertaining, but the wide receiver one, the one we're about to make, I think it's double that. The reason I think this video might top them all, and it might be the best one out of all of them, is because some of the stories, they're insane. Wide receivers are the divas of football. They have the most personality. That's not my personal opinion. It's been a proven fact that wide receivers, they do some of the craziest things not only on the field, but off the field. From getting suspended, getting in fights, getting kicked off of teams, thrown in jail, the list goes on and on. You name it, a wide receiver has probably done it. Most, not all of them, but most quarterbacks and running backs, they have that humble personality trait. They take more of that leader approach and it's more business-like. That's also a main reason whenever we do see a quarterback with the characteristic traits of a Johnny Manziel or Baker Mayfield, we love to see it. The biggest downfall of Johnny Manziel and Baker Mayfield, at least up to this point, is they have the personality of a wide receiver. At the quarterback position, that's not really a good thing. In college, you can get away with it, but in the NFL, these teams, they want a grown man as their quarterback. They don't want someone who's immature. They want a guy who's level-headed, not a guy who acts like a wide receiver. I think you get my point. Wide receivers, they have bold personalities. That's what makes them so intriguing. And in today's video, we're going to take a look at what happened to every #1 wide receiver recruit from 2000 all the way up into 2021. Let's get into it. Real quick, before we get into it, these videos especially take a very, and I mean a very, very long time to make. So if you would do me a huge favor, I am going to ask if you would hit that subscribe button, leave a like. It really helps me out and it lets me know you want to see more videos like this. Seriously, if you do enjoy this video, it would mean a lot to me if you hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 200K, so let's see if we can get a little bit closer. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Get you a snack, get you some popcorn. It's going to be a long and good one. Without further ado, let's get into it. Man, oh man, we have a long way to go, but kicking it off in 2000, the #1 wide receiver in the country went by the name of Charles Rogers. Charles was born in Michigan, and that's where he played his high school football, but he didn't just play football, he also played basketball and track. Obviously, he decided to go with football, and it turned out to be a good decision, at least early on. For his recruitment process, he kept it simple and decided to go to Michigan State. Whoa, hold on. Before we talk about his Michigan State career, you may be sitting there wondering, yeah, he was a #1 wide receiver, but just how good was he? Maybe this will do it some justice. A former linebacker said, "Just from watching him, I thought he was the second coming of Randy Moss." I think we can all agree that is some high praise. It doesn't get too much better than being compared to Randy freaking Moss. Getting back on topic with Michigan State, when he got there, he didn't play his first season, so in his next year, 2001, his sophomore year, he went off. In 12 games played, he had 67 catches for a whopping 1,470 yards. That comes to nearly 22 yards per catch. On the year, he wound up pitching in 14 touchdowns. But hold on, we got to talk about that. 22 yards a catch? That's insane. He was a great deep ball threat. Every time he caught the ball, you thought he had a chance to score. Just look at the numbers. He had 67 catches and 14 of those were touchdowns. That's nearly 1 out of 4. I'm not going to do the calculations, but I think it's right at every 5 catches, one of them was a touchdown. Heading into his second year, which was 2002, aka his junior year, it was a carbon copy paste. He had 68 catches for 1,351 yards, averaging 20 yards a catch with 13 touchdowns. I say this every time we do these videos, but I want you to take into account all of these stats are from early 2000s. This isn't 2022 or even 2015 or even 2010 where they're throwing the ball a lot. We're talking about old school football where you run the ball first, then you throw it. Nowadays, we're accustomed to seeing teams throw and mix in a run here and there. Back then, it was run, and you mix in a throw. Even still, with that being said, if he put up those numbers today in college football, it would be great. I don't think it's ludicrous for me to say those numbers today would equal to about 2,500 receiving yards. He was so good after that junior year. Listen to this. He entered the NFL draft in 2003 and he was the 2nd overall pick. The last time I think a wide receiver got selected that high that I can remember is Amari Cooper. I'm not too sure if a wide receiver has ever been selected the number 2 overall. He got selected by the Detroit Lions, and this is good and bad. It's good you got selected that high, it's bad you got selected by the Lions. If you watch NFL football, you know what I'm talking about. The Detroit Lions is where dreams go to die. It might be one of the poorest ran franchises over the past 20 to 30 years. I'll leave it at this. There was a reason they had the number 2 overall pick. Unfortunately for Charles Rogers, this is where his dreams would also die. He only played 3 years for the Lions, where he racked up 36 catches and 440 yards with 4 touchdowns. Sadly, his NFL career could never get off of the ground because he had 2 collarbone injuries and it was detrimental to his career. It wasn't the injuries that was so bad, it was the fact that he was taking painkillers and he got addicted. And when I say addicted, I don't mean slightly, I mean in the worst way possible. He was a full-on drug addict. It got so bad, and I've never seen a case of this, that the Lions had to suspend him for the entire 2005 season for drug abuse. Right after that, they wound up releasing him, and it was a very bad situation. He even stated in an interview, quote unquote, "It put me in a depression." My biggest thing is, and I've said it time after time after time, we're all going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. It's all about how you respond to those mistakes. If you can look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I messed up, and turn your life around, then I'm going to applaud you. I'm not going to criticize you. But when you make a mistake and then you compound it with another one and another one and another one, next thing you know, you're 45 years old and you throw your life away. That's where I don't have too much sympathy. I'm not even sorry about it. I can't feel bad for you if you don't want to better yourself. That's what happened with Rodgers. After he got released by the Lions, he made more bad decisions. He never played in the NFL again, but in 2008, he got charged with assault and battery of his girlfriend. The charges were dropped, and in 2008 and 2009, he was placed back into jail for violating his probation. After he got out of jail in that same year, September of 2009, he was arrested for driving under the influence. I don't know why I said driving under the influence. In short terms, it's a DUI. When the officer pulled him over to check on him, he was unresponsive behind the wheel. Then, if that wasn't enough, in the next year, 2010, he was arrested once again for passing out from drinking too much at a restaurant. Overall, terrible life choices, and you hate to see it. He was being compared and looked at as the next Randy Moss. In 2009, with an interview with ESPN, he said that the way he was living, doing all these drugs, and just his overall lifestyle, that's why he had a downfall in the NFL. This guy's story is absolutely insane, and I just touched on the high points. I actually think I'm going to make an entirely different video dedicated to his story alone. Ladies and gentlemen, that is just the first player in this video, and we have a long way to go. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention this. In 2019, he did happen to pass away. The cause of his death was labeled as liver failure. Like I said, I'm going to make an entirely different video dedicated to him. RIP Charles. Let's get into the next one. In 2001, the number 1 wide receiver in the country was Roscoe Crosby, and he attended Clemson University. When he got to Clemson in 2001, as a true freshman, he appeared in 9 games where he had 23 catches for 396 yards and 3 touchdowns. Nothing crazy. As a true freshman, not too bad. In 2002, he was supposed to have a breakout year, but he had to miss the entire season due to an injury. This injury he suffered was on his right elbow, and he had to have surgery in June. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not hyping this up. It is cold hard facts, and I'm feeling chills just talking about it. You want to talk about a weird yet disturbing story? This is one of them. Remember, like I said, he played in 2001, had an okay year. He didn't play in 2002. He was rehabbing. In that summer of 2002, heading into 2003, his life would quote-unquote change forever, according to almost every article out there. One fun fact about this kid is not only was he an NFL prospect, he was also a Major League Baseball prospect. Coming out of high school, the Kansas City Royals drafted him with the 53rd overall pick and offered him $2 million at the time, and back then in 2001, that was serious money. I would say a $2 million signing bonus back then is probably the equivalent to $8 or $9 million now. Long story short, he turned that down, but in the offseason, he was training for the Royals in their league down in Florida. While he was training, some of his friends decided to drive down there, and they got in a car accident, and 3 of them was killed. Roscoe Crosby was not killed, but it was said that affected his life. Weirdly enough, while all that was going on, Roscoe happened to tear another ligament in his elbow and had to have surgery once again, and his brother would go missing. It was said that his brother disappeared while he was swimming in a lake, and the body was not found until 3 days later. Think about all the bad stuff that happened in a short amount of time. His friends were driving to come see him, and they got a car wreck, and some of them died, and then not too long after, his brother passed away after disappearing. Terrible, terrible stuff was happening, and here's what he had to say about it. I went for the quick fixes to feel better. I'd buy a car, go out all night, do stupid things like that. I couldn't see I was just digging a deeper hole for myself. Eventually, he would make his return back to Clemson in August, but he withdrew from the program in school and said it was quote-unquote family reasons. Here's what he had to say. I love my teammates. Coach Sweeney was incredible. He was so supportive, but with everything I was dealing with, I didn't have it in me. I couldn't play. Around 2004 and 2005, he went down a dark path, battled with depression, and he would attempt to try to go to the NFL. He couldn't enter the real NFL draft, so he had to enter the supplemental NFL draft, and he didn't even get selected. Or not selected, I think the better way to say it is he didn't get picked up. The only shot he kind of has was the Colts. They worked out a deal with him, but long story short, it didn't work out. Fast forward in time all the way up into 2013, he would go back to Clemson and finish out his degree. Right after that in 2014, he was a part of Clemson's football team. He was labeled as an advisor and student coach, and here's what he had to say. I'm at peace. I feel like I have a lot to offer to a lot of people. One of the biggest things is hope. That right there is what I'm talking about. It's not about how many times you fall in life. It's about, can you look in the mirror and say, okay, I've fallen 8 times. I got to get up 9 times. He may have went through some hard times and made some bad life choices, but eventually he got it right. I applaud him for that. It takes a lot of guts and courage to go back to college and admit you were doing some bad things and turn your life around. As much as I do respect that, I do got to be honest. He was a bust, and he might be, just like the last guy, one of the biggest what ifs, especially for college football. To be the number 1 wide receiver in high school football, to only have 300 to 400 receiving yards in your career, it's not good. It is what it is. We got to get a move on and head into 2002. The number 1 wide receiver recruit in the entire country was Ryan Moore. His football career at Miami was very long and not very good. He played not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 seasons at Miami. I'm going to read all of his stats off right now because it's not too much to go over. In his first year starting in 2002, he played in 4 games where he had 1 catch for 29 yards. In 2003, he played in 13 games where he had 44 catches for 637 yards and 3 touchdowns. In 2004, he played in 6 games where he had 9 catches for 85 yards. In 2005, he played in 11 games where he had 28 catches for 460 yards. And last but not least, in 2006, he played in 5 games where he had 12 catches for 250 yards. He had his moments here and there. Overall, he was a mediocre receiver. In 2006, though, there was a scandal that came out where apparently him and a woman, they got into it. According to ESPN, and I'm going to read it word for word off of their article, so you know I'm not making this up, they said he grabbed a woman by the throat and pushed her to the ground and threatened her. He wound up being arrested. From everything I could tell, though, nothing really came out of it. Of course, with him having these off-the-field problems and him not being good at Miami, no NFL team, they drafted him. He tried his luck with some indoor football leagues, one of those being the Jacksonville Sharks and Nebraska Danger, but you know how that goes. If you're playing for indoor football leagues, you're basically saying, okay, this is the bottom of the barrel, and my football career, it's not going anywhere seriously. Considering how in-depth and detailed our first 2 stories were, that one was kind of short. That's all there is to it, though. In 2003, the number 1 wide receiver in the nation was Whitney Lewis. Whitney Lewis, does that not sound like a girl name to you? I don't know, maybe it's just me. Not only was Mr. Whitney Lewis the number 1 wide receiver in the country, he was the number 2 overall player in the country. He would sign with USC, and as a freshman in 2003, he played in 8 games where he had 3 catches for 27 yards. Check this out. I found this extremely interesting. He wanted to go to Florida State, but he was so young he couldn't even sign his letter of intent to go there. He was only 17 years old, and technically to sign your letter of intent, you got to be 18. So basically, in other terms, his parents forced him to go to USC. If you're wondering why I wanted to go to Florida State, that's where his best friend was going at the time, Lorenzo Booker. It's safe to say if your parents are forcing you to go to a college you don't want to go to, it's more than likely not going to work out in the first place, and that's what happened. As you could tell from the stats, he rarely played at USC, and he wound up transferring to Northern Iowa. Kind of strange if you had to ask me. He was one of the best players in high school football, and only a year later he ends up at Northern Iowa. After transferring to Northern Iowa, if you thought his career was going to get a jump start, you'd be completely wrong. He fell off the face of the earth. Like literally, you can try to search up and do some research yourself. There is nothing about this guy anywhere. I'm not gonna lie to you, I looked for nearly an hour trying to find out anything about him and I couldn't find a single thing. So if you know what happened to Whitney Lewis, do us a favor and let us know in the comment section or let me know on Instagram. I hate to end a player's story off there, but when I don't know anything, I'm not gonna try to make up something. Gosh man, now it intrigues me even more. I wanna know what happened to him, but we got to get a move on. Let's get into 2004. In 2004, the #1 wide receiver in the nation was Early Doucette, and he went to LSU. At LSU, he was solid. He wasn't a guy that before the games you talk about with your friends and say he's going to take the roof off of the building, but he was a guy you could count on. You knew every single game and every single year what you was going to get out of him. He was reliable. In his first year at LSU as a true freshman in 2004, he had 18 catches for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not too bad. In his second year as a sophomore, he had 26 catches for 389 yards and 5 touchdowns. As a junior, this is when he really took his game to another level. He had 59 catches for 770 yards with 8 touchdowns. There was some talk that maybe he'd enter the NFL draft early. He didn't. He came back for his senior year and he improved his draft stock. He had 57 catches in his senior year with 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like I said, it's not crazy impressive, but he wasn't like your typical wide receivers like we've already talked about. He didn't get in too many off the field problems. And for wide receivers, for some reason, like I said, they're the divas of the NFL and college level. That's something they struggle with. He would enter the 2008 NFL draft and he was selected in the 3rd round by the Arizona Cardinals with the 81st overall pick. Why did I say peak? It's pick. Come on, Matt, get your words right. For the Cardinals, it wasn't bad and you can make a case at times it was really good. It just never took off. He played 5 years for them and had 139 catches for nearly 1,500 yards. In 2013, the Cardinals did release him, but then shortly after, the Seattle Seahawks signed him. That seemed to be the end of his NFL career, and nobody heard too much about him. That was up until 2019. Well, actually, 2017, he was brought up into the news, but 2019, it was a bigger situation. This is when a temporary restraining order was placed on him because he brutally attacked his wife, not for the first time, but for the second time. It is on file that he is ordered to stay at least 100 yards away from his wife and the 2 children. According to the documents, he attacked a woman and smashed up their house. You already know I don't have a lot of sympathy, and you better believe I'm gonna have zero in this situation. You're entitled to your own opinion, but for me, if you put your hands on a woman, I think you're a dirtbag and you're a piece of crap. Those are my words I'm gonna use for it, and I think I could use much worse. You get the point. I'm not gonna sit up here and rant and rave about why you shouldn't hit a woman. You guys know you shouldn't. And if I should have to explain why you shouldn't, maybe you're one of those people who need to go get some help. I've never understood it for the life of me how a grown man can feel so powerful and great about himself for beating up a girl. There's pictures and evidence to back up this situation. I mean, look at this picture right here. There's a hole in the wall. I thought we was gonna have a normal story for once in this video. I guess not. Let's get on to 2005. The #1 wide receiver in the country in 2005 was Patrick Turner. Coming in at 6'5" and 205 pounds, he committed and signed with USC. At USC, he was okay, maybe good at times, but he wasn't quite as great as some people thought he'd be. I'll let you take a look at his stats for yourself. He had a $170 his first year, $270 his second year, $560 his third year, and in his last and senior year, he had $740. Overall, for his 4-year career, he had 138 catches for 1,750 yards and 17 total touchdowns. After that senior year, he entered the NFL draft in 2009, where he got picked up in the 3rd round with the 87th overall pick by the Miami Dolphins. His NFL career was non-existent. He bounced team to team and struggled to find playing time. In his 4-year career, he only had 10 catches for 122 yards with 1 touchdown. Yeah, his career came to an abrupt ending. He didn't have too many off-the-field problems from everything I saw, and that's it. Finally, I guess we could say we had a normal wide receiver for once. In 2006, the #1 wide receiver in the country was a fan favorite and a guy that a lot of you may know we got Mr. Percy Harvin. We're now starting to get back into the modern day times where you're going to start to pick up and remember some of these guys. Percy Harvin, dare I say he was a Florida football legend? I don't think that's insane to say. I vividly remember him being a speed demon at the college level. At Florida, he had a lucrative career where he did a little bit of everything. I'm talking about kick returns, punt returns, receiving, and rushing. As a freshman, he had 41 rush attempts for 400 yards, which is 10 yards a carry, 3 touchdowns on the ground, and as a receiver, he had 34 catches for 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. As a sophomore, this was really his breakout year. He had 83 rush attempts for 760 yards. That's over 9 yards a carry. If you thought that was impressive, check this out. As a receiver in the same season, he had 59 catches for 850 yards with 4 touchdowns. He was the definition of lightning in a bottle. What made him so good, and I think a great comparison, is Tyreek Hill in the NFL. He was a Tyreek Hill for Florida. He was a guy on your team where if you're a head coach, you're like, okay, we just got to get him the ball somehow, some way. It didn't matter if it was passing it to him, a jet sweep, handing it off, a punt return, anything, you name it, you just wanted the ball in his hands. Cause if you knew the ball got in his hands, it could have been a touchdown at any given moment. Let's talk about his senior year real quick before we move on and before I forget. In that senior year, he had 70 rushes for 660 yards, which is once again over 9 yards a carry. He pitched in 10 touchdowns on the ground. Through the air, he had 640 receiving yards with 7 more touchdowns. If there was such things as putting up a triple-double in college football, his stat line is what a triple-double would be. After his junior year, he elected to skip his senior year and go for the NFL draft, but he tested for weed at the NFL Combine, and this was a bad sign. Okay, maybe saying it was a bad sign, that's the wrong way to say it. Let me word it a different way. It was more of a caution flag, and it was even said at the time that a lot of teams took him off their draft boards, and that's why he fell down. Some people thought he did fall down, some didn't. Anyways, it doesn't matter now. He got selected in the first round with the 22nd overall pick by the Minnesota Vikings. All in all, when you look at it, he had a good NFL career, but it was also troublesome here and there. In 2010, he passed out in the middle of a practice due to a migraine attack. I can't really remember if it was a big deal at the time, but he was taken to the local hospital and he got discharged only a couple days later. Throughout the beginning of his NFL career, he spent a lot of times with the Vikings, and then they traded him to the Seattle Seahawks, where he signed another massive contract for $67 million. He already made a ton of money with the Vikings, and now with that contract, he was going to be set for life. Shortly after he signed that contract in 2013, he had to have surgery on his hip. One of his brightest moments, and maybe the best moment of his NFL and football career, was in the Super Bowl. He had an 87-yard return touchdown to help lead the Seahawks to the Super Bowl win. His career with the Seahawks would come to an abrupt ending. It was rumored that he was having altercations with teammates and the coaching staff. Apparently, he was arguing with teammates and he was refusing to go back and play in the middle of games. The Seahawks would trade him to the New York Jets because they didn't want to deal with all that mess anymore. And then after only playing for the Jets in 1 year, he was then playing for the Bills in 2015. He didn't play with the Bills or do really anything with them too much longer, and in 2017 he officially announced he's retiring from football. I wouldn't even say he had a good NFL career, I would say he had a borderline great NFL career. Wide receivers aren't like quarterbacks, offensive linemen, and defensive players. They don't last too long in the NFL. He got in the league in 2009 and played all the way up into 2016. And when he was playing, he was putting up good numbers. Let me change that. I'm not going to say he had a great NFL career. I'm going to say he had a really good one. From everything I've seen since then, he's living a happy life. He's a multi-millionaire. He's got a ton of money and he's living the dream. Hey, that's what happens though when you focus on football. You become a multi-millionaire. I wish some of the other guys we talked about would have done the same thing. We saw it. Percy Harvin, yeah, he had some inconveniences and problems here and there, but it wasn't on a large and magnified scale like some of these other players. I gotta keep it real though, I don't remember Percy Harvin from his NFL days. When I hear his name, I think of Florida. In 2007, the #1 wide receiver in the nation was Terence Toliver. Coming in at roughly 6'4", 200 pounds, he committed and signed with LSU. Terence Toliver, I like that name. There's something about it, it's got a nice ring to it. At LSU, I don't want to say he was a disappointment, but he kind of was. Considering all the hype and attention that was around this guy, and he didn't have a season with over 800 yards, it was disappointing, at least in my opinion. He played all 4 years at LSU from freshman to senior year. He did battle some minor injuries here and there, but he played in 13 games over a 4-year career. I realize I said that wrong. I don't mean he played in 13 total games. I mean he played in over 13 games every single season. He didn't have a lot of minor setbacks. He played in every single game, so there was no excuse for him to not get at least over 800 yards. That's where my argument's coming from. In his first year, he had 250 yards. In his second year, he had 250. In his third year, he increased it to 730. But in his senior year, it dropped back down to under 600. In his 4-year career, he only had 12 touchdowns. That's 3 a season. Not too good. I don't even want to say he's a bust. I simply think he was misevaluated and he was never really that good. Maybe he was just a monster at the high school level and he tricked all these recruiters. I don't know, and maybe it sounds like I'm being harsh, but NFL scouts, they agreed with me because he went undrafted in the 2011 NFL draft. He would sign with the Houston Texans in 2011 after the draft, but they waived him early on. He never got a real and legit shot in the NFL. Matter of fact, he never played a single game in the NFL. After getting released from the Texans, he bounced around from practice squad to practice squad. He went from the Lions to the Bears to the Chargers, back to the Bears once again, before signing with, listen to this team, the Hamilton Tiger Cats out of the Canadian Football League. In the Canadian Football League, he was somewhat successful. In one season in 2016, he caught 65 passes for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. Right when things were looking good though, in his first game of 2017, he tore his ACL. He didn't quit, he came back in 2018, and in 12 games played, he had 32 catches for 450 yards. Sadly, his career would come to an end in 2019 because he wasn't re-signed by the team, and technically he's listed as a free agent. I did some more digging and research though, and according to his Twitter bio, he is an offensive coordinator and a wide receiver coach. Although he didn't have an outstanding football career, it seems like he's winning at life. He's enjoying himself. In 2008, the #1 wide receiver in the country, I think you're going to know who this guy is. We got Julio Jones. Mama, there goes that man. Coming in at 6'4", 220 pounds, a 5-star recruit, he committed and signed with Alabama. If you couldn't tell already, he's one of my personal favorites. One thing a lot of people don't understand about Julio Jones is he was one of the turning points in recruiting at Alabama and Nick Saban. He was Nick Saban's first 5-star recruit to commit to the program and turn things around. A lot of people don't understand that when Julio Jones signed with Alabama, that was a terrible team. He was a part of the recruitment process that turned everything around and turned Alabama into the dynasty that it is today. Why I love this man and look up to him so much, it's not because he's a great wide receiver and super talented. There's a ton of people like that, but he's a great role model. You don't see a lot of wide receivers with the mentality that Julio Jones has. When you think of this guy, you don't think of off the field problems or a guy that's going to cause problems in your locker room or everyday life. He's going to come to work and do what he needs to do and go home. I could sit up here for 30 minutes and say so many good things about him. He's a great person and a great athlete, and that's rare. It shouldn't be rare, but nowadays it is. At Alabama, I wouldn't say he was a monster like he was at the high school level, but he was getting there. A main reason his numbers are somewhat low is because Alabama wasn't this high-powered offense like they are now. Like I was telling you, he was the turning point into Alabama becoming a really good team. In his first year at Alabama as a true freshman, he had 58 catches for 924 yards and 4 touchdowns. However, in his second year, he only had 43 catches for 600 yards and 4 touchdowns. It wasn't that he got worse, it was just they weren't throwing him the ball, and I hope that makes sense. A main reason his numbers took a hit is because defenses were game planning for him. In 2010 though, in his junior year, the game plans, they couldn't even stop him. He had 78 catches for a whopping 1,133 yards and 7 touchdowns. You didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out Julio Jones was going to terrorize defenses in the NFL. Wow, now that I think about it, I can't believe it, but it's true. Julio Jones' football career, it's coming to an end. I hate to admit it, but he is out of his prime. I would say his prime was around 2014 up until 2019. I don't want to bore you guys. You know how his NFL career's gone. He's been an absolute unit for the Atlanta Hawks. Ever since he's left the Hawks, it hasn't been all too good. He went to the Titans, it wasn't great, and now I believe he's looking to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You guys should know Julio's story. If not, you must live under a rock. Maybe the best best part about his game isn't even his game, it's more about how he handled all the pressure. He's one of those few guys who was regarded as one of the best players in the country coming out of high school, and he lived up to the hype and expectations. Every single player we've done up to this point has failed to do what Julio did. So many good things you could say about him. We got to get a move on. Let's head into 2009. In 2009, the #1 wide receiver recruit in the country went by the name of Reuben Randall, and he committed and signed with LSU. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is already our third LSU #1 wide receiver. What's up with LSU and these #1 wide receivers, man? Reuben Randall, like Julio Jones, was the #1 wide receiver in the country, but Reuben Randall, he didn't live up to the hype. I will say at LSU, he did live up to the hype. In his first year, he had 170 yards. In his second year in 2010, he had 540 yards. And in his junior year, his last year, 2011, he had 900 yards. He was really good for LSU, and he was a solid player. He wasn't a Julio Jones by any means, but he had a lot of potential. He entered the 2012 NFL Draft, and he was selected in the second round with the 63rd overall pick by the New York Giants. He was with the Giants for 4 years and had a great stint with them. In those 4 years, he had 188 catches for 2,600 yards and 20 touchdowns. Not too bad. Following that stint with the Giants in 2016, he signed a 1-year contract with the Eagles for $3 million, but he was released shortly after. After being released by them in 2017, he signed a new contract with the Chicago Bears, but got released again. I guess he realized no NFL team wanted him, so in May of 2018, he signed with a Canadian football team known as the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Whoa, hold on. What is up with these weird Canadian football team names? I don't understand why they're so strange. Let me know about that in the comments. But after signing with them, he was released by the Canadian team in June. He signed with the team in May and was released in June. Strange. Why even sign him in the first place? And yeah, that is the end of his football career. Considering how good he was for the Giants, and I remember it wasn't too long ago, I can't believe he's not in the NFL. This one's so odd to me because at the Giants, you can look at his stats, he put up good numbers. I don't know, I just felt like his NFL career, it was cut a little too short. This video stops for nobody though, not even Reuben Randall. We got to get a move on. We're finally at the halfway point. 2010, once again, I'm going to remind you guys because this video has taken so long to make. If you could do me a huge favor and go down there and hit that subscribe button, I would really appreciate it. Seriously, I don't do no BS sponsorships on this channel. I could do that. I don't. The only thing I ask out of you is for you to subscribe. Hope you guys are enjoying this video. Let's get back on with it. Sorry for the interruption. In 2010, the #1 wide receiver recruit in the nation was Kyle Prater. Once again, we got another USC one. I think already out of 10 players, 6 of them have gone to USC or LSU. Like many other of these USC wide receiver stars, or supposed to be stars, it didn't work out at USC. In 2011, in his freshman year, in 10 games, he barely got in and only had 1 catch for 6 yards, and he decided, you know what, I'm transferring. And he went to Northwestern. At Northwestern, this is where his career kind of got revived later on. In his first 2 years there, he barely played. He only had 10 catches in 2012 and 9 catches in 2013. Didn't even have over 100 yards, but in his last and senior season, he went off. I said he went off. Well, let me clarify that. He went off, at least in his terms. He had his best season yet. In 11 games played, he had 51 catches for 535 yards and 2 touchdowns. In a 4-year football career, he didn't even surpass 700 career yards. Safe to say that even he knew he was going to go undrafted, and that's what happened. But after going undrafted, he got picked up by the New Orleans Saints. Why did I say New Orleans? It's New Orleans. I forgot how to talk. Anyways, after getting picked up, he was released by the Saints, and yeah, that's the end to it. Ever since getting released by the Saints, he has given up on his football dreams, and he's now a director, according to his Instagram. I believe that's his main thing, what he's doing now. He says he's an award-winning filmmaker, and he's a storyteller, producer, and a director, and a universal man, and a visionary. He also said that he's coming out with his own NFTs, and I think that is one of the stupidest things ever. It's basically a scam. I'm not getting into that NFT bullcrap conversation. That's a different topic for a different day. Just because I think it's bullcrap, though, it doesn't mean you can't be successful in it. That's just my opinion. From everything I saw on Instagram, he seems like a really motivated person. He's posted over 1,000 times, so Feel free to go check it out for yourself. Hey, here's my biggest takeaway. At least he's chasing something and he's off his butt. He's not getting in any trouble and he's chasing his dreams, and that's what all these players should be doing if their football careers don't pan out. I'm wishing him the best of luck in his director and filmmaking career and everything else he chooses to do. Seems like a cool dude. In 2011, the number one wide receiver in the country was George Farmer, and he, just like our last guy, went to USC as well. Man, oh man, USC has a ton of bust, especially at the wide receiver position. His career at USC wasn't too much better than any of the other guys we've already talked about. He did suffer an ACL injury while he was there, but in 3 years total, he only had 30 catches for 363 yards with 4 touchdowns. For some odd reason though, instead of coming back for his senior year and trying to improve his draft stock, he thought he was good enough to forego that senior year and go to the NFL draft. I don't know his reasoning behind that, but it was utterly ridiculous and stupid because in 2015 he went undrafted. After going undrafted, he did get picked up by the Dallas Cowboys. He didn't last long with them, and eventually in 2015, the same year, the Seattle Seahawks picked him up. Things never really worked out for the Seahawks, and in 2017 they released him, and that's the end of his football career. In 2012, this is a good one. Not only the number one wide receiver in the country, but the number one overall recruit in the country was Dorial Beckham. That's actually insane and so rare. He was the number one overall player in the country as a wide receiver. I think it's safe to say, out of all the players in this video, he had the most hype around his name. I'm going to let you know right now, I'm only going to touch on the high points. I'm going to make an entirely separate video for this guy because his story deserves one. At Missouri, it didn't take long for him to start getting in trouble. In his first year, he got arrested and suspended. When he got suspended, he missed the Vanderbilt game and the Alabama game, so he only appeared in 11 games that year, where he had 28 catches for nearly 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Here was the biggest problem with Beckham. He was one of the most talented, not just receivers, most talented players in the country, but he couldn't stay out of trouble. It's self-explanatory. Your best ability is availability. I don't care if you're the next Randy Moss. If you can't stay out of trouble, what good does it matter? After that troublesome freshman career, heading into his sophomore year, he stayed out of trouble to a certain extent. In his second year at Missouri, he appeared in all 14 games where he had 59 catches for 880 yards and 12 touchdowns. That's good. It's not outstanding. I mean, he didn't have over 1,000 yards, but it was respectable. Sadly though, after the season in April 2014, he was dismissed from Missouri due to legal troubles going on. That was a nice way of saying it. I'm just going to be blunt. Missouri kicked him off of the team. After Missouri kicked him off of the team, he transferred to Oklahoma and thought the NCAA was going to let him play right after, but they denied his request. After the NCAA denied that request, he entered the 2015 NFL Draft. Dorial Beckham Jr. is the definition of a high risk, high reward. It's risky picking him because you don't know if he's going to stay out of trouble, but if he can somehow turn his act around, he could be the steal of the draft. That was a decision that all these NFL executives and GMs faced. Do we take a risk and gamble on a guy that's been in a ton of trouble, or do we not? I want you to think about this. He got suspended not once but twice from Missouri, and he was still selected with the 40th overall pick in the second round. I'm telling you right now, if he would have stayed out of trouble and had that Julio Jones mentality, he could have easily been maybe possibly a top 3 NFL selection. But because the man is stupid and wants to ruin his life and throw it away, he wasn't. And I don't mind calling him stupid, because if you're getting in off the field problems, you're basically saying I don't like money. Because when you get in all these off the field problems, you're causing yourself and your family millions of dollars. So yeah, that's stupid, at least in my book. Anyways, getting back on topic, it didn't work out with the Titans. He got traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, and it didn't get much better. In 2017, he was waived by the Eagles, and his life has went downhill since. If you are curious though, for the Titans and the Eagles, in 2 years, he had 68 catches for 941 yards and 6 touchdowns. Not terrible. It's good, but once again, it's just all the off the field problems that are adding up. I want you to listen to this, and like I said, this is the high points. I'm going to make an entirely separate video talking about all of this. In 2017, he was arrested for a DWI in Springfield, Missouri. In 2018, he he was arrested for having weed, and in 2021, recently, he was arrested for assault charges, property damage, and resisting arrest. And again in 2021, he was arrested for violating probation. There's not another way to put it, and it's very simple. He ruined his own football career and life because he couldn't stay out of trouble. I've never understood it, and I never will. It's not that hard to stay out of trouble. I will say that till the day I die, and I firmly believe it. I honestly too think it's selfish if you have a golden opportunity to get to the NFL and make millions and millions of dollars, and you throw that away because you want to act stupid. Yeah, that's selfish because you're costing your family money that you could help them out with too. I just don't get it, and I don't want to get too into detail because I got a long video saved up for this player's story in particular. We've got to get a move on. In 2013, the number one wide receiver in the nation was Laquan Treadwell. I had to slow down to say that. That's a tongue twister. Laquan Treadwell, there we go. He was the number one wide receiver, and he committed and signed with Ole Miss. That's a big pickup for Ole Miss because they're not known for getting a lot of five-star recruits. At Ole Miss, as a freshman, he had 72 catches for 600 yards. In 2014, he was dealing with injuries, but in 2015, he went off. As a junior, he had 82 catches for 1,150 yards and 11 touchdowns. Following that 2015 season, he elected to skip out on his senior year and go to the NFL draft early. It turned out to be the right decision. Treadwell was selected in the first round with the 23rd overall pick by the Vikings. His NFL career hasn't gone how he hoped it would, but it's not over yet. For the Vikings, I'll show you his numbers right here. Nothing too crazy. He had 200, 300, $180, and then he went to Atlanta Hawks and now the Jacksonville Jaguars. For the Jaguars in 2021, he had his best year yet. He had 33 catches for 434 yards. He's currently still in the NFL and he's still with the Jaguars, and his story is still being written. I think he would agree with this statement. His NFL career, it has been disappointing, but he can still turn it around. In 2014, the number one wide receiver recruit in the nation was Speedy Noil, and he committed and signed with Texas A&M. Speedy Noil, there we have it again. It's just a football player name. At Texas A&M, it wasn't exactly good. Maybe it was a combination of they weren't using him right, but he never reached his full potential. In 2014, as a freshman, it was his best year. He had 46 catches for 580 yards. Following that great and outstanding year, he never had a year with over 325 yards. In 2015, as a sophomore, he had 220. In 2016, as a junior, he only had 325. After his not-so-hot Texas A&M career, he had a brief stint in what was said the NFL, where he joined some practice squads here and there, and he also joined the Canadian Football League. He also joined some indoor football leagues, but in 2019, he came back into the news, and it wasn't for a good thing. In September of 2019, he was arrested on 4 charges. Speedy Noil, aka the former number one wide receiver recruit in the country, was charged with assault, evading arrest, and failure to pay bond on 2 previous charges. According to the report, Speedy Noil struck a man in the side of the face with a closed fist, and they were wrestling on the ground. Then right after that, the following day, Speedy Noil was playing his music too loud in a park, and the security came up to him. When the security guards came up to him, Speedy Noil pulled out a knife on them, and he would leave the scene by jumping a 10-foot fence. And now the most recent up-to-date on him in 2022 is that he's attempting to revive his football career. He's playing in Canadian football leagues and some other indoor leagues as well. Safe to say his career took a turn for the worse. In 2015, the number one wide receiver recruit in the country went by the name of Calvin Ridley, and he committed and signed with Alabama. Oh man, good old Calvin Ridley. I think a lot of you know the most recent up-to-date on him. He got suspended from the NFL for gambling. Is Calvin Ridley a bad person? No, he just made a mistake, and hopefully he doesn't do that again. Not going to spend too much time on his story and career. It's been pretty simple. At Alabama, he dominated from day one. As a freshman, he had 89 catches for 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. The year after, he had 700, and the year after that, he had 1,000 once again. He forewent his senior year and entered the draft early, and he was selected in the first round with the 26th overall pick by the Atlanta Falcons. Him and Julio Jones, ironically enough, former number one recruits, and they were on the same team, and they were balling together. Ridley for the Falcons was putting up career numbers early on. In 2018, he had 800 yards. In 2019, he had 800 once again, and in 2020, he had a whopping 1,374. Sadly, though, in 2021, 2021, he was battling some injuries and also some mental problems. Ever since then, he got caught for gambling, and I just hope his mental state is getting back to what it should be. I don't think he has a problem, and according to him, everything's okay. I guess time will tell. In 2016, the number one wide receiver in the nation was Demarcus Robinson, and he went to California. You want to talk about a wild career, this guy's had one. In 2016, he played for California. He was great. As a freshman, he had 50 catches for 760 yards and 7 touchdowns. After that great year in 2016, he barely played in 2017. He would then transfer to Georgia in 2018, where he didn't even play at all. So after that great year in 16, he didn't play in 17 and 18. Well, he did play, but it was minimal action. In 2019 for Georgia, in 13 games played, he had 30 catches for 300 yards, and in 2020, he appeared in 6 games where he had 12 catches for 100 yards. But then somehow, someway, after that Georgia year, I guess because COVID gave him another year, in 2021, he transferred to Auburn, where he had his best year in a while. He had 37 catches for 489 yards with 4 touchdowns. This guy came into college football in 2016 and played up until 2021. That's 6 years of college football. And yeah, I'm guessing more than likely he's going to enter the NFL draft, and that's all there is to say about it. Wow, what a long college football career. Safe to say you don't see that every day. In 2017, the number one wide receiver recruit in the country was Donovan PeoplesJones, and he committed and signed with Michigan. For Michigan, he was slightly underwhelming and also think slightly underused. They're a running football team, at least they are nowadays, and if you're a wide receiver, you're not going to get the ball a lot. I don't really think he was a bust or a real disappointment. He was more of a misuse athlete. Despite that, in his freshman year, he had 270 receiving yards. In his sophomore year, he had 600. And in his last and final year, 2019, he had 430. He entered the NFL draft early, skipped his senior year, and he was selected in the 6th round with the 100th and 87th overall pick by the Cleveland Browns. Here's what I'm talking about him being misused at Michigan. And I guess you could say the Browns, they got a steal. In 2020 for the Browns, he had 300 receiving yards, and in 2021, he had nearly 600. He's only played 2 years in the NFL, and for the Browns, he's looking like not a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, but a good wide receiver 3. He's a good complementary guy to your offense, and maybe one day he could be that wide receiver 2. Seems like a great and humble guy. I'm wishing him the best of luck. Let's get a move on. In 2018, the number one wide receiver recruit in the country was Justin Shorter, and he attended Penn State. At Penn State, let's just say things were not so good. In 2 years of playing there, he didn't even have over 200 receiving yards, so he said, you know what? Screw this, I'm going to Florida. I can't blame the guy. Florida is a much better place. It's warmer, it's more football weathery type. Going to Florida turned out to be the right decision because it improved his football career. In 2020, he had 25 catches for 268 yards, nothing special, but in 2021, he had 41 catches for 550 yards. That's the up-to-date on him. I don't think he's ever going to turn out to really live up to the hype and expectations, but you never know. In 2019, the number one wide receiver in the nation was Jaden Hasselwood, and he committed and signed with Oklahoma. Jaden Hasselwood, I like that name as well. Got a good little ring to it. At Oklahoma in his first year, he didn't stand out too much. As a freshman, he had 19 catches for 270 yards. As a sophomore, didn't play too much. He redshirted that year, matter of fact. And in 2021, he had 39 catches for 400 yards and 6 touchdowns. Hasn't really peaked into and reached his potential like I think he will in the future. I wouldn't give up on this guy just yet. Although the numbers, they're not jumping off of the boards, I think he can get there one day. He's got great size, great potential, great speed, and I like him overall. In 2020, the number one wide receiver recruit in the nation was Julian Fleming, and he committed and signed with Ohio State. Or my bad, he committed and signed with the Ohio State. Hasn't been too productive at Ohio State. A main reason for that is because their wide receiver depth chart is insane. Think about it. Jameson Williams, who is a stud or was a stud at Alabama, had to leave just so he could play. And look how he turned out. If that doesn't tell you how good Ohio State's wide receiver room is, I don't know what will. As a freshman in 2020, he had 7 catches for 74 yards, and as a sophomore in 2021, he had 12 catches for 86 yards. Once again, I gotta emphasize it, it's hard to evaluate this guy because there's so much talent ahead of him. From everything I've heard, he's going to be special, and of course, he was a stud at high school, so I'm excited to see what the future holds. In 2021, the number one wide receiver recruit in the country was Emeka Ibaka, hope I'm saying that correctly, and he also went to Ohio State. In 2021 for the Buckeyes, he was slightly more productive. He had 9 catches for 191 yards. Once again, though, I feel like I'm repeating myself. The wide receiver room at Ohio State is loaded. We won't be able to see what these former 2 number 1 recruits can do at Ohio State till this up and coming year. Dang, man, now that I realize it, this video has just came to an end. Man, oh man, I can't lie. A ton of research, a ton of effort, just a ton of everything went into this video. If you guys enjoyed it, I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed. I am literally out of breath. Let me know your thoughts on all this down below. But with all being said, let's go. Peace.